The photographs told one story, the kind everyone wanted to believe. Ethan and Sophie Miller smiled through polished filters. His hand resting proudly on her rounded belly, her head tilted on his shoulder, sunlight soft behind them. To strangers, they were a dream couple, successful, expecting, and deeply in love. Their followers adored the updates, nursery photos, ultrasound frames, "Can't wait to meet you, little one red heart." But away from the screens, the air inside their home was heavier. Sophie often caught herself staring at those same pictures on her phone, wondering when her smile had started to look so rehearsed. Ethan liked things just so. The house spotless, dinner at 7, and her voice never raised. At first, it seemed like care. Lately, it felt like control. "Don't stress," he'd tell her gently, brushing her hair behind her ear. "You need to rest. For our baby." The word "our" always landed like a chain. Her friends noticed, though she brushed it off with practiced ease. At brunch, when she was allowed out, they would exchange looks, the kind only women give when they sense danger in another woman's silence. "He seems intense," her friend Chloe had said once, hesitantly. Sophie had smiled too quickly. "He's just protective." But her hand had trembled when she reached for her tea. Ethan was watching even then, from the cafe window, pretending to be on a work call. Later that night, he'd asked too casually, "Why were you laughing so much with Chloe?" When Sophie hesitated, he smiled, the same smile from their photos, and said, "You know, people might start thinking you're unhappy. We don't want rumors, do we?" That night, Sophie deleted her last private message to Chloe, a half-written sentence that began with, "I don't know if I can do this anymore." Ethan made sure her world was small. He handled the bills, the phone plan, even the car keys. "You shouldn't be driving so far in your condition," he said one morning, taking them from the hook by the door. His voice was warm, his hands gentle. That was the most dangerous part. He never shouted, never hit. Just pressed, reshaped, and folded her life until it fit inside his control. And yet, to anyone looking from the outside, Ethan was perfect. A devoted husband, a soon-to-be father, and a man who still kissed his wife on the forehead every night. Sometimes, when Sophie lay awake, she imagined the baby's heartbeat, steady, fragile, echoing her own. It reminded her of what she still had to protect. One evening, as a soft rain tapped against their windows, Ethan entered the room with a small smile. "You've been cooped up for weeks," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "We should take a break. Just us." Sophie turned in his arms, startled by the sudden warmth. "A break?" "Yeah. A weekend away, before the baby comes. Somewhere quiet. No phones, no stress, no one bothering us." Something inside her hesitated. No phones. But then he kissed her temple, and the hesitation drowned in the weight of habit, of wanting peace, even false peace. "That sounds nice," she whispered. Ethan's smile widened, but his eyes stayed unreadable, calm, controlled, calculating. "Good," he said softly. "We'll leave Friday morning. I already know the perfect place." He pressed a final kiss to her forehead and walked away, humming low to himself. Sophie sat there, the sound of rain growing louder against the glass. She looked again at their framed photo on the dresser, his arm around her, both smiling into sunlight. It should have looked like love. But all she could see now was his grip. The road stretched endlessly ahead, gray, cracked, and glinting under the pale morning sun. Sophie watched the world blur past through the car window, trees thinning into empty plains, radio static humming softly in the background. Ethan's hand rested on the steering wheel, steady, relaxed. Too steady. He'd been humming the same tune for miles, something cheerful that only made the silence heavier. "You okay?" he asked suddenly without looking at her. Sophie forced a small smile. "Just tired." "Yeah," he murmured. "You've been tired a lot lately." There was no accusation in his tone, but something underneath it tightened her chest. She turned her gaze back to the glass, tracing the faint reflection of her face, pale, thinner than she remembered. The trip had begun before sunrise. Ethan woke her gently, saying, "Let's beat the traffic." He packed everything himself, clothes, snacks, the camera bag, and a sleek black drone he'd bought, to capture memories. Sophie hadn't questioned it, she'd learned not to. Now, with every mile, civilization faded behind them. No gas stations. No other cars. Just the rhythmic hum of tires eating distance. How much longer? She asked quietly. Couple of hours, Ethan replied. You'll love it. Blackridge has the cleanest air you'll ever breathe. She nodded, but her stomach churned. The name sounded familiar. She'd seen it once in a travel vlog, a vast wilderness with sheer cliffs and little else. No hospitals, no phone signal. Just emptiness. Her fingers moved to her belly. The baby kicked, a small, fluttering heartbeat against her palm. For a fleeting second, she felt anchored, reminded of why she was still here. But the comfort was short-lived. A memory surfaced. 3 weeks ago, she'd hidden an envelope in the nursery closet, her passport, a few $100s, a letter for her mother. If something happens, don't believe what he says. It was her secret plan, one she replayed every night like a prayer. She wanted to leave after the baby was born. When it was safe. When she could run. Do you remember our first trip together? Ethan asked suddenly, breaking her thoughts. Sophie blinked. What? The lake house, he said with a faint smile. You spilled wine on my shirt and cried for an hour. You were so sensitive back then. I still am, she said softly. He chuckled, but there was no warmth. Yeah. You are. They drove in silence for another stretch. Then Ethan reached into the back seat and pulled out the camera bag. We'll use the drone at the cliffs. You'll love the view. I want to capture you standing there, like a goddess. The word capture made her throat tighten. She shifted, trying to sound casual. Maybe we shouldn't hike too much. My doctor. Your doctor, he interrupted smoothly, said walking's good for you. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. Sophie looked at him. His eyes were fixed on the road, face calm, composed, like a man rehearsing a role he'd perfected. The landscape began to change, denser trees, sharper turns, a narrow bridge over running water. A wooden sign appeared, Welcome to Blackridge National Park. No service beyond this point. Ethan smiled. See? Peace and quiet. Sophie's phone buzzed weakly, then lost signal entirely. The final text she managed to send, without him noticing, was just 2 words to Chloe. Weekend trip. Her heart pounded as the road wound upward into mist. Pines loomed tall, their shadows moving like specters across the windshield. The air grew thinner. Almost there, Ethan said, his tone calm, too calm. She forced another smile, clutching her belly. Her reflection in the side window looked like someone else, someone disappearing. Outside, the world narrowed into a tunnel of gray fog and gravel. When Ethan finally turned off the main road onto a dirt path, Sophie's breath caught. The sound of crunching stones filled the silence. Ahead, the sky opened into a vast stretch of wilderness, untouched, endless, and terrifyingly beautiful. Ethan stopped the car and killed the engine. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he turned to her with that same perfect smile from their photos. Let's make some memories, he said quietly. Sophie swallowed hard, nodding, unaware that this road had no way back. The road turned from gravel to dirt, then to nothing at all. Trees swallowed the path, their branches knitting overhead until only streaks of pale light filtered through. Sophie glanced at her phone. No service. The screen might as well have gone dark. Ethan's voice broke the silence. Perfect. Just us and nature. He parked by a clearing near a small lake, its surface still as glass. Mountains loomed beyond it, snow-tipped and silent. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, peaceful, yet suffocatingly quiet. Sophie stepped out, cradling her belly as she took in the scene. The chill hit her skin, sharp and clean. For a moment, she almost believed this was what he promised. A weekend of calm before the baby came. Ethan moved with purpose, unloading the car, pitching the tent, stacking logs for a fire. He looked like a man who'd done this before, too practiced, too organized. Then came the camera bag. You really brought the drone? She asked, forcing a small laugh. He grinned. Of course. We'll want to remember this. Our last trip before 3. Sophie watched as he set it up, his hands steady and careful. The drone lifted with a soft hum, climbing higher until its blinking light became a distant star. Its mechanical whir echoed through the valley, the only sound for miles. Ethan turned toward her, smile wide, eyes shining. "Come on, stand by the water. Let's get a shot." She hesitated but obeyed, standing at the lake's edge, arms folded over her belly. The drone circled above, recording. Ethan came up beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. To anyone watching, it would look tender, a man in love with his wife, cherishing their unborn child. But Sophie could feel it, the tension beneath the surface, the way his grip lingered just a little too long. Later, they sat by the campfire, the flames flickering gold against their faces. The night air was growing colder. Crickets sang faintly in the dark. Sophie watched sparks drift upward and disappear into the sky. She tried to sound casual. "I have my next appointment on Tuesday." Ethan looked up from the fire. "What?" "My doctor's checkup," she repeated. "Just a routine scan." Something in his expression shifted, barely, but enough. His jaw tightened, the warmth in his eyes dimmed. "You didn't tell me that," he said flatly. "I was going to," she replied quickly. "It just came up." He stared into the flames for a long moment, then smiled, too smooth. "You worry too much, sophomore. You and the baby are fine. You don't need to run to doctors for every little thing." "It's not every little thing," she said quietly. Ethan's voice softened, but the edge remained. "You should trust me. I'd never let anything happen to you." The fire popped, startling her. She nodded, ending the argument before it began. He reached for the drone controller, glancing up as the small light blinked across the dark sky, its camera tilting down toward them. "Smile," he murmured. Sophie forced one, though her chest felt tight. The lens stared back, cold and unblinking, capturing a moment that looked peaceful but wasn't. When the fire burned low, Ethan zipped the tent closed and lay beside her. His breathing slowed into sleep. Sophie stayed awake, listening to the wind slide through the trees, the distant ripple of the lake. She reached for her phone again, still no signal. Just the same 2 words in the corner of the screen, no service. Outside, the drone light blinked one last time before vanishing into darkness. Sophie turned her face toward the tent wall, feeling the baby shift within her, a quiet reminder that she wasn't alone, even here. And yet, the silence around her felt like the edge of something waiting to break. A thin layer of fog drifted over the lake when Sophie woke. The fire had died, and Ethan was already up, crouched near the tent, tinkering with the drone. The faint whir of its rotors buzzed through the stillness. "Morning," she said softly, rubbing her eyes. He turned, smiling like he hadn't slept at all. "Perfect timing. The light's beautiful. Let's go for a short hike before breakfast. Capture the sunrise." Sophie hesitated. "A hike? Ethan, I'm not sure." "Just a little one," he interrupted. "You'll love the view from the ridge." The word ridge made something tighten in her chest. She pulled her sweater closer, feeling the chill cut through her. But he was already packing a small bag, water bottle, camera, drone remote, and his unshakable enthusiasm. "Trust me," he said, holding out his hand. "You'll want this memory forever." She took his hand, though her fingers trembled. The forest was still half asleep as they began to climb. Mist curled between the trees, and each step stirred damp leaves underfoot. The drone hovered behind them, its soft hum following like an obedient ghost. Ethan's stride was long and confident, while Sophie lagged a few paces behind, breathing heavily. Her body ached, her belly felt heavier with each incline. Still, she kept moving, part fear, part duty. "You okay back there?" he called without turning around. "Just slower," she managed, forcing a smile when he finally looked back. He laughed, though his tone was sharp. "Guess you're not as adventurous as before." Before. The word hung between them. Before the baby, before the distance, before she'd stopped pretending everything was fine. As they climbed higher, the fog thinned, revealing a breathtaking view of the valley below. The lake looked like a sheet of glass, untouched and endless. Sophie paused, resting a hand on a nearby rock. "Maybe we should stop here," she said softly. "It's already perfect." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. No, no, the top's just ahead. We'll get the full sunrise there. He lifted the drone controller, sending it higher into the air. The device tilted and steadied, recording their every movement. Its mechanical hum felt louder now, invasive, as though it was watching, not filming. Sophie's heart raced. Ethan, please. I'm tired. He turned to her, the sunlight cutting across his face. Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance, maybe contempt. But when he spoke, his voice was smooth again. You always give up too early, sophomore. You should push yourself more. For the baby. The word struck her like a slap. For the baby. She wanted to say that was exactly why she couldn't keep climbing, but she swallowed the words. They reached a narrow section of the trail, where the ground sloped steeply toward the valley. Rocks crumbled under their shoes. Ethan walked ahead, steady, sure. Sophie followed carefully, gripping the strap of her bag. Her breath came in short bursts now. Sweat gathered at her temples. The drone's shadow passed over her, then vanished again. In the quiet, Ethan's thoughts twisted, fragments of resentment and fear. She doesn't look at me the same. Always tired. Always distant. She's already planning to leave, I can feel it. After everything I've done for her. He didn't notice his hands tighten into fists until Sophie stumbled behind him. Ethan, she gasped, slipping on the loose gravel. Her knee hit the ground hard. He turned slowly. For a second, his face softened, instinct, maybe, but it faded just as quickly. His eyes studied her, calculating. She looked up, breathing hard. Can you help me up? He didn't move right away. The drone hovered above, recording. The sunlight painted everything gold, the trees, the rocks, the faint line of blood on her palm. Then Ethan smiled. You'll be fine, he said softly, offering his hand at last. His grip was firm, almost too firm. Sophie stood, brushing off the dirt, still catching her breath. She didn't see the expression that crossed his face as he looked up toward the cliff ahead, something dark, resolved. He turned to the camera in the sky and said, almost to himself, let's go a little higher. Sophie followed, unaware that each step now carried them closer to the edge, and that the drone, silent and watchful, would soon become the only witness left. The trail narrowed until it was no wider than a single step. The air had thinned, crisp and bright, carrying the faint scent of pine and cold stone. Ahead, the ridge opened into a jagged overlook, a place where the world seemed to fall away into endless sky. Sophie stopped first, one hand pressed to her chest, breathing heavily. Ethan, I think this is high enough, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He didn't answer. He stood a few feet behind her, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun had begun to rise. Gold spilled across the peaks, catching in her hair, turning her into a silhouette of light and warmth, everything he'd once wanted and now feared losing. Look at that view, he murmured. It's perfect. Sophie turned, a small, exhausted smile on her lips. Yeah, she said softly. It is. The drone hovered above them, humming quietly, its red light blinking against the morning haze. It circled, adjusting focus, as if it sensed something about to happen. Ethan lifted the controller absently, then lowered it again. His fingers were shaking. She took a cautious step toward him, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Can we go back down soon? I'm starting to feel dizzy. He met her eyes, and something flickered there. Anger, fear, confusion. He wanted to speak, to tell her not to leave, not to make him feel small again. But the words came out twisted. You always want to stop, Sophie. Always tired, always afraid. Her brow furrowed. Ethan, what's that supposed to mean? He stepped closer. You're already planning to leave, aren't you? She froze. The truth hung between them, sharp as the wind. Please. Let's just go home. We'll talk there. He laughed, but the sound cracked midway. Home? You mean your home? The one you'll run back to the moment I turn my back? Her eyes widened. That's not true. Don't lie to me. His voice rose suddenly, echoing across the valley. The drone caught the sharpness in his tone, the tremor in his hands. Sophie took a step backward, her heel brushing loose gravel near the edge. "You're scaring me," she whispered. For a heartbeat, Ethan's face softened, the part of him that once loved her fighting to surface. But then the memory of her secret phone calls, her growing silence, her distance, it all pressed down like a wave. He reached for her. To Sophie, it looked like help, a gesture of reconciliation, of safety. She reached back, her fingers trembling. But his hand landed on her shoulder, not to steady, but to push. The world split open with her scream. It cut through the morning air, sharp and short, before vanishing into the abyss below. The drone tilted, lens tracking the sudden movement, her figure tumbling once, twice, then disappearing into the trees far beneath the cliff. The hum of the drone was the only sound left. Ethan stood motionless, breath ragged, staring down. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He waited for something, guilt, horror, maybe relief, but all he felt was the sickening rush of silence. He dropped to his knees, gripping the edge, calling her name once, twice, louder each time, until his voice broke. Then, slowly he pulled back, whispering to himself. It was an accident. She slipped. She slipped. He repeated it again and again, each time softer, until it sounded almost believable. The drone hovered above, recording his every word, its light blinking steadily, a silent witness to everything he wanted to forget. Ethan stood, wiping his face, forcing calm into his breathing. The performance began again. The concerned husband, the panicked man who had tried to save her. But even as he stumbled back toward the trail, one thought followed him like a shadow, the faint mechanical hum overhead, still recording. Ethan ran until his lungs burned. Branches tore at his sleeves, gravel skidded under his boots, and every few steps he shouted her name, not out of hope, but performance. The echo that came back was empty. When the trail finally widened near the park's main road, he stumbled toward a weathered sign marked Ranger Station, 2 miles. His breathing was ragged, his heartbeat uneven, but his plan, the story, was already taking shape in his mind. She slipped, he muttered aloud, practicing the words between gasps. She wanted a photo. I tried to grab her, she slipped. By the time the small wooden cabin of the ranger station came into view, he was covered in sweat and dust. He burst through the door, startling the middle-aged ranger inside. My wife, he shouted, voice cracking perfectly on cue. My wife fell off the cliff. Please, you have to help her. The ranger, badge reading R. Denton, immediately reached for his radio. Where exactly? Ethan pointed back toward the ridge, stammering, I don't know. Near the lake trail, maybe a mile up. She was taking pictures. She lost her footing. Denton's tone shifted to command. Stay here. I'll call search and rescue. You need to sit down. But Ethan didn't sit. He paced, pulling at his hair, trembling just enough. Years of watching courtroom documentaries and police interviews had paid off. He knew exactly how much grief to show, when to let his voice break, when to look away. I told her not to go so close to the edge, he whispered. She just wanted a better angle. Within 20 minutes, 2 rescue trucks arrived. Radios buzzed, ropes and stretchers were loaded. Ethan climbed into the passenger seat of one, insisting on going back up with them. Please, he begged, I have to be there. The rangers exchanged glances. They'd seen husbands like him before, desperate, broken, guilty of nothing but tragedy. Back on the ridge, the sun was beginning to fade. A helicopter circled once overhead. They searched until dark, flashlights cutting across the cliffside. No sign of Sophie. Only a torn scarf caught on a branch far below. Ethan knelt near the edge, staring into the darkness. Cameras from a local news crew, alerted by the rescue call, caught his silhouette, the perfect portrait of grief. He wiped at his face, letting tears fall freely now. They didn't have to be real, they only had to look real. She was pregnant, he said quietly when a ranger offered him water. 6 months. The ranger's face softened. We'll do everything we can, sir. Ethan nodded, lowering his head, pretending to pray. Inside, his thoughts were methodical. I'll tell them she was distracted. I'll stay cooperative. I'll never lose my temper. Accidents happen. By midnight, the search was suspended due to low visibility. Ethan rode back to the ranger station, clutching Sophie's scarf. He gave a statement, calm but shaken, ending every sentence with, "I just wish I could have done more." When the interview was over, he drove home under the cover of darkness. His hands no longer shook. Inside their house, he moved like a ghost, locking doors, turning off lights, standing in the quiet nursery for a long moment. The half-painted walls, the crib still in its box, the folded baby clothes, all reminders of the story he'd just erased. Then he sat at his desk and opened his laptop. The drone bag sat beside it, still dusty from the hike. He plugged in the memory card, scanning through the files. Hours of footage, some of the lake, some of Sophie smiling faintly at the camera, some of nothing but trees. He watched long enough to find the clip ending right before her fall. The rest, thankfully, was gone. Relief washed over him. He deleted every file, dragged them to the trash, emptied it, and leaned back in his chair. The act felt final. "Goodbye, Sophie," he whispered. Outside, a police cruiser idled at the end of the street, routine follow-up before dawn. Ethan didn't notice. He was already closing the laptop, convinced the truth had vanished with her. But miles away, on a cloud server he'd forgotten existed, a single file from the drone had already auto-synced, time-stamped, crystal clear, and waiting to be found. The morning after Sophie's accident, fog rolled thick through Blackridge Valley, clinging to the pine trees and muffling every sound. Detective Laura Hayes stood beside the ranger station's bulletin board, scanning the incident report one last time. Female, 29, missing. Pregnant. Husband reports accidental fall. Hayes, a veteran of 20 years and survivor of her own crumbling marriage, had seen too many cases dressed up as accidents. The first thing she noticed wasn't the details. It was the tone of Ethan Miller's statement. Precise, composed, practiced. When she finally met him, he was already sitting in the small ranger office, arms crossed, eyes red but dry. He looked like a man who had studied grief rather than felt it. "Mr. Miller," she greeted softly, closing the door behind her. "I'm Detective Laura Hayes. I'll be handling your wife's case." Ethan nodded, his voice low and rehearsed. "Thank you. I just want her found." She sat across from him, placing a recorder on the table. "Tell me everything again. From the morning of the hike." He launched into the story as if pressing play on a script. "We wanted to watch the sunrise. She was taking photos and she slipped. I ran after her but..." He broke off, covering his face. Laura watched carefully, not the tears but the timing. Each emotion arrived too perfectly, as though he'd memorized when to look away, when to choke up. When he was done, she leaned back. "Did Sophie have any health issues? Fainting spells?" He shook his head quickly. "No. She was perfectly healthy." "Any arguments that morning?" "Of course not," he said, smiling faintly. "We were happy. Excited for the baby." Something in the word happy felt brittle, hollow. Hayes made a note. A ranger knocked on the door, handing her Sophie's missing persons file and a few recovered items. A torn piece of scarf, a hiking boot, and Ethan's drone bag. "Did you use this on the trip?" she asked casually, gesturing toward the bag. Ethan froze, a fraction of a second, barely noticeable. Then, "Yeah, but it fell during the hike. Lost signal. Probably still out there somewhere." Hayes nodded slowly. "Those things can survive a fall or two. We'll have our tech guys scan for it." His jaw tightened. "It's probably gone." She didn't push further, not yet. "We'll see." Later that afternoon, Hayes met with Chloe Rivera, Sophie's best friend. Chloe sat hunched on the edge of her couch, gripping a mug like it was her last anchor. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her voice burned with quiet rage. "Something was wrong between them," Chloe said. "Sophie wouldn't tell me everything, but I knew. She said he'd become controlling, checking her phone, her messages. He'd smile for people, but when they were alone, it changed." Hayes's pen moved steadily across her notebook. "Did Sophie ever mention leaving him?" Chloe's eyes filled. "Yes. After the baby was born. She said she needed to stay safe until then. She even started looking for apartments." Hayes felt the air tighten. Did he know? I think he suspected, Chloe whispered. The last week before they went on that trip, she said he kept asking if she was still happy. Over and over. The detective's instinct screamed. She'd seen this pattern too many times. The charming husband, the sudden accident, the missing footage. When she left Chloe's house, the sky was heavy with gray clouds. She sat in her car for a long moment, replaying Ethan's words in her mind. It probably fell. Too clean, she murmured. Too fast. At the station that evening, Hayes reviewed the search reports. Rangers had found no sign of Sophie's body yet. The cliff's depths were treacherous. But something else caught her eye. A drone signal briefly detected in the area hours after the reported time of the fall. She leaned closer to the screen. So it didn't fall. Her pulse quickened. She turned to the tech officer nearby. Can we trace a drone's cloud backup if it was synced through Wi-Fi? Sometimes, he said. Depends if the owner connected it to an account. Hayes's lips curved slightly. Good. Let's find out what account Mr. Miller used. She looked again at Sophie's smiling picture pinned on the board, a woman unaware her last moments might already be stored in pixels and code, waiting for someone to press play. Outside, thunder rolled over the valley. Somewhere in the darkness, Ethan slept soundly, believing the story was his to control. He had no idea the real investigation had just begun. The storm from the night before had left the town washed clean, puddles glinting beneath the morning sun. In a small apartment above a hardware shop on Main Street, Liam Porter, a 27-year-old drone hobbyist and coder, sat hunched over his monitor with a cup of cold coffee and a half-eaten sandwich. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was just browsing through a drone-sharing forum, a place where enthusiasts posted flight paths, footage, and tech advice. But one username caught his eye. eat@im_adventures. The account had uploaded a file automatically, timestamped the same weekend as the missing person alert flooding local news. Out of curiosity, Liam clicked. The thumbnail showed a woman's figure, back turned, standing on a mountain ledge. He pressed play. The footage was shaky at first, morning light filtering through mist, the sound of wind against the propellers. Then came laughter, soft but nervous. A man's voice. Come on, Soph, just one more step back. The view's better there. Liam's breath hitched. He knew that name, Sophie Miller, from every news headline the last 2 days. He watched, frozen, as the camera panned. The woman's smile faltered. Ethan, I don't like being this close, she said, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. The man stepped forward, too calm. Trust me. Then, a jolt, a scream, a blur of motion. The drone spun midair, catching a flash of her falling form and the man's expression, cold, unflinching, before the feed cut to static. Liam's stomach turned. He sat back, shaking. This wasn't an accident. He knew he couldn't ignore it. He downloaded the metadata, screenshot the public link, and called the local police. You need to see something, he told the dispatcher, his voice trembling. It's about the missing woman at Blackridge. Detective Laura Hayes arrived at the small apartment an hour later. Liam showed her the video, his hands jittery as he replayed it. The room fell silent except for the mechanical hum of the drone's rotors echoing through tinny speakers. When the screen went black, Hayes spoke quietly. Can you send this directly to our evidence server? Already did, Liam said. It was public for a while, anyone could have seen it. I flagged the upload before it spread. Hayes nodded, gratitude flickering in her eyes. You did the right thing. She left with the footage on a secured drive, driving straight to the precinct. The tech team confirmed it within minutes. The GPS coordinates matched the same cliff Ethan had described in his statement. The file's origin was tied to Ethan's registered drone serial number. There was no room for doubt anymore. Hayes watched the footage again in the dimly lit evidence room, her jaw tightening with every second. The way Sophie hesitated. The way Ethan's body barely flinched after she fell. The way his face, for a split heartbeat, seemed almost relieved. She paused the frame right before impact. Ethan standing at the edge, staring down, his hands still outstretched. Got you, she whispered. The room was silent except for the faint whir of the playback system. Hayes took a steady breath, then called her captain. We have visual confirmation of homicide. I'm filing for a warrant, arrest, property search, everything. Outside, rain began again. A soft, relentless drizzle tapping against the windows like time itself closing in. In his suburban home across town, Ethan Miller sat at his kitchen table, news reports replaying the ongoing search. He looked calm, sipping coffee, believing his performance had sealed the story forever. Then his phone buzzed, a notification from his cloud storage. Your shared file, drone footage _trip1, received multiple reports for inappropriate content. Ethan froze, the color draining from his face. He clicked the alert, but it was too late. The link was gone, restricted under police authority. His reflection stared back from the dark screen, his breathing quickening. Somewhere far away, a detective was already watching what he thought he'd erased. The sky outside the precinct was washed pale gray when Detective Laura Hayes walked into interview room 3, a slim manila folder under her arm. Ethan Miller sat at the metal table, hands folded, eyes steady. He looked almost at peace, freshly shaved, dressed in a pressed shirt. A man who believed the storm had passed. Morning, detective, he said politely. Any news? Hayes didn't answer right away. She set the folder down, sat across from him, and studied his face, the carefully measured calm, the faint arrogance behind his charm. We do have some news, she said at last. Search teams recovered some items near the ridge, and our tech division found something unexpected. He tilted his head, curious. Oh. Hayes slid a single photo across the table, a still frame from the drone footage. It showed Sophie mid-turn, her face fearful, Ethan's hand reaching toward her. For the first time, the color drained from his expression. Where did you? She cut him off. From your drone. It auto-synced to the cloud, Mr. Miller. Someone found the footage online. Ethan blinked rapidly, a twitch in his jaw betraying the panic he was fighting to hide. That's impossible. It must have been edited. No, Hayes said, her tone sharp but calm. We've verified it. The metadata matches your device. The location, the timestamps, even your voice. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. His fingers trembled slightly. You don't understand, he whispered. Then help me, she said. Explain it. Silence. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the space between them. Finally Ethan spoke, his voice low, almost pleading. She was leaving me. Hayes didn't move. She was planning to take the baby, start over, he continued, eyes glassy. I did everything for her. Everything. And she made me feel invisible. His words cracked. That morning she said I wasn't enough. She said she'd raise our child without me. So you killed her, Hayes said softly. He slammed his hand against the table, the calm fracturing. I didn't mean to. I just wanted her to stop talking, to listen to me for once. She backed up, I reached out. Hayes's tone hardened. The drone shows otherwise. Ethan froze. His breathing quickened, shoulders rising and falling in jagged rhythm. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, he muttered. She wasn't supposed to fall. I thought I could fix it. Fix it? Hayes repeated, voice cold. By deleting her? He looked up then, eyes red, face streaked with sweat. You don't know what it's like to love someone so much they start to disappear right in front of you. Hayes let the words hang there, the weight of them pressing into the silence. Then she stood, signaling to the officer outside. Ethan Miller, you are under arrest for the murder of your wife, Sophie Miller. 2 uniformed officers entered. Ethan didn't resist when they pulled him to his feet. His knees seemed to buckle slightly, the last of his confidence draining away. As they turned him toward the door, Hayes paused, the video still playing on the screen behind her, the moment before Sophie's fall. Ethan glanced back at it, eyes locking with his own frozen image. For a heartbeat, something hollow flickered across his face, not guilt, but disbelief. The kind of emptiness born from realizing that even your lies have betrayed you. The officer clicked the cuffs closed. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. I just wanted her to stay. Hayes watched him as he was led down the corridor, silent except for the faint metallic rattle of chains. The door closed. In the observation window, his reflection lingered for a moment. A man who thought he could control the story, now trapped inside the ending he wrote himself. 3 weeks after the arrest, the town of Blackridge felt quieter, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Rain had washed the cliffs clean, tourists stayed away, and wildflowers began to grow near the edge where Sophie Miller had fallen. In a small living room filled with framed family photos and the faint hum of a television, Margaret Miller, Sophie's mother, sat clutching a blanket around her shoulders. The TV screen flickered with the polished glow of a true crime documentary, The Blackridge Case, What the Drone Saw. The opening credits rolled over soft, haunting piano music. A familiar face appeared, Detective Laura Hayes, sitting in an interview chair, her expression calm but heavy with truth. It started as a missing person case, Laura said, her voice measured. A husband desperate for answers. But the evidence told a different story, one that couldn't stay buried. Margaret's hand trembled as she reached for the remote but didn't press pause. She had avoided watching until now. The neighbors had called, friends had texted, all warning her it was graphic. But she needed to see it. She needed to know. The footage began. The drone's mechanical were filled the speakers. The morning light bled across the cliffs, just as Sophie must have seen it. Then came her laughter, fragile, uncertain, followed by Ethan's coaxing voice. Come on, Soph, just one more step back. The view's better there. Margaret's throat tightened. She gripped the blanket until her knuckles turned white. The camera angle shifted, Sophie's uneasy glance, her hand resting protectively on her belly, the sudden tension in Ethan's stance. Then the push. The scream. The footage cut to black. A narrator's voice filled the silence. The drone automatically synced to a public cloud minutes after the incident. It would take 2 days, one tech enthusiast, and one determined detective for the truth to surface. Margaret closed her eyes. The tears came soundlessly at first, then broke into quiet sobs. Her daughter, her baby girl, reduced to a headline, a clip, a tragedy streamed for strangers. But beneath the grief, there was something else, relief. For once, the world could see Sophie, truly see her, not as Ethan's perfect wife, but as a woman who'd fought to survive his control until the very end. On screen, Laura's voice returned, softer now. The truth always finds its way, sometimes it flies. The documentary shifted to trial footage. Ethan stood in court, hands cuffed, staring blankly as the prosecution replayed the drone video frame by frame. The courtroom murmured as the jury watched the push, the coldness in his eyes, the mechanical spin of the drone capturing it all. When the verdict came, guilty of first-degree murder, the audience gasped, some even wept. Ethan didn't speak. He simply lowered his head, his lips moving soundlessly, as if arguing with ghosts no one else could hear. The camera cut to Laura leaving the courthouse, rain falling lightly around her. I've seen many crimes in my career, she said to the reporter. But this one, it solved itself. Technology became its own witness. The screen faded to black for a moment before one final scene appeared. The drone, the same model, newly recovered and repaired, rose into the sky over Blackridge National Park. Its blades cut through the mist, following the same flight path from that fateful morning. Below, the cliff stretched wide and empty. The lake shimmered beneath, reflecting the pale morning sun. There was no sound but the wind, a hollow, endless echo. For a fleeting moment, as the camera drifted near the edge, the faintest shimmer appeared in the reflection. A silhouette, soft and white, standing where Sophie once stood. The drone lingered, almost as if it remembered. Then the feed cut, leaving only static. Back in her living room, Margaret wiped her eyes, whispering to the darkened screen, "You're free now, sweetheart." In another part of town, Detective Hayes closed her laptop after previewing the same footage. She stood by her office window, looking out at the mountains. "Case closed," she murmured, but her tone carried both pride and sorrow. Outside, the wind picked up again, the same wind that had carried Sophie's last breath, now sweeping over the cliffside like a promise that nothing stays hidden forever. And somewhere, high above, the drone continued to hover, its red light blinking against the gray sky. Silent, watchful, eternal, the ghost that had once seen everything and finally told the truth.